And remember, we went from this to this. There's a lot you can achieve in technology with just a vision. What's up, everybody? This is Michael from Detail in the Shadow. I'm here at one of my favorite places. We're going to take a post-Thanksgiving walkthrough through the United States Museum, National Museum of the United States Air Force. Let's go. And as you can see, it's a massive arrangement. I like to start off in the early days. And as you can see, it is a massive arrangement, 4 hangars, all full of historical airplanes, aircrafts. I like to start off in the beginning. In the extreme early days, it was balloons of hot air. Air less dense than the cooler air. Warmer air would be pushed up by the less dense, cooler air. Then they moved on to the gliders. I'm actually in Dayton, Ohio right now, just outside of it on a military base. 2 bicycle mechanics who were told that it was impossible had a dream, and they had a vision of flight. And that dream and that vision came to fruition. In the early days, the internal combustion engine had been perfected to its time, to where a 4-cylinder such as this could produce 25 horsepower. And then the vision was, if you put a prop or a propeller on the front of this, maybe we could use those gliders for just a little bit more than gliding. The dirigible, often called blimps, relied on gas pressure in the envelope to maintain their shape. Two examples of early aircraft, even water-cooled, but the structure was mainly some sort of metal, and the lifts were made out of canvas. The 1909 Wright Flyer. And like most inventions, they were quickly adapted for military use. The 1909 Military Flyer. Right here, the early years, the 1911 Model D from Curtiss just had a 60 horsepower V8 engine. And in a very short period of time, the internal combustion had grown by orders of magnitude in size and power and torque output. More torque, more power to spin the propeller, the faster and more capable the aircraft. The Wright 660, going up from 25 horsepower on average to 60 horsepower. And can you imagine the thrill that it was to fly one of these in the early days of aviation? A massive thrill. Then in a matter of less than a decade, World War I came. The engines were on average 100 horsepower, which gives us the standard J1. Beautiful aircraft. Then along came manufacturers such as Curtiss with their V23 engines, producing double at 200 horsepower. You can see magnetos, internal camshaft, which is overhead valve. You can see the valves right there. The intake plenum and the exhaust ports. And if you love horsepower, think aviation, because we went from massive engines that were really inefficient, not making much horsepower, to compact engines making hundreds and hundreds of horsepower. And here we have the Curtiss OX5, water cooled. Once again, you can see the overhead valves. Now this one has a full exhaust manifold that goes 4 into 1 on each side, because this is a V8. And you can see the water passages. And one magneto this time. The Curtiss JN4D, nicknamed Jenny, utilized in World War I, was a twin-seater. And you can see that exhaust manifold, the 4 into 1. This one had a wooden structure. And here we have an introduction to the Lerone C9, a rotary engine. Just 80 horsepower on this one. Overhead valve, air cooled. And here we have the Gnome N9 rotary engine. We have an example. You can see that spark igniting that combustion chamber. You can see the bearings. You can see the piston going up and down in those external cylinders. Now the external cylinders made it easy for repair, but in any machinery, when you have more parts than needed, you have complications. Extremely colorful, not very tactical, but colorful indeed. You have other manufacturers who decided to join in. Hispano Suiza, known for their high-end automotive vehicles, still in World War I. We have the SPAD 13C1. Always a progression in the technology. You have closable front vents for the cooling. And you also have the integration of firearms. And still in World War I technology, we have the Bug UAV you think drone technology is new, they were utilizing it all the way back in World War I. Bugatti. And still in the progression of World War I, we have the massive 16-cylinder King Bugatti, making a whopping 410 horsepower. And here we have an example of the process of the canvas wrap. You would have the wooden structure, the first canvas layer, the first coat, the second coat, and even the third coat, and then the fourth coat would be the color. Now, if you could imagine that massive engine being wrapped in a structure of wood and steel belts to keep them rigid. Two-seater in the cockpit. Now, one thing that I'm always intrigued by, having an automotive background myself, trying to build horsepower, is the progression of the engines. The Liberty L8, the Liberty L6, I guess we're going backwards here, and the Liberty L4. So we went from 102 horsepower four-cylinder to a 215 horsepower six-cylinder to 270 horsepower V-type V8. And one thing that we can notice here is the progression of the overhead cam. You can see right along there the camshaft that's driving these valves, the intake and exhaust, is not inside of the block, but actually on top of the heads. Now, still in World War I technology, we come with the massiveness, the Caproni CA.36. Crew of 4, and it has 3 V-type engines that are 150 horsepower water cooled. It is all military progression. We have the integration of armament. All right, check that. That's just 2 straight 6s, not V-types. Like I mentioned before, we have excellent examples of the progression of the engines. This is the Samson Z9, France, 1918. We got the ABC Wasp, 1918. Let's see. Go back. 280 horsepower, 290, a little bit more efficient. We have Bentley, a familiar name, high end, 230. We have the Renault 300, the Lorraine Dietrich 220, the Curtis 375 horsepower, the Benz 200, Anzani just 90 to 100 on average, and the RFA little V8 making 90 horsepower. With the coming of the interwar years, Between World War I and World War II, we have an explosion of technology. Right here we have the Martin MB2. You can see two massive V8s, water cooled. And we even have the integration of bombs. Now, bombs were used before then, but they were actually thrown out by either the pilot or the co-pilot. These are dropped in the fashion that we are used to mechanically. Once more, the progression of engine technologies. We have the Wright, familiar name. The Curtis, familiar name. The Rosenberg. The Wright T3. It's a massive engine. This one, we're getting all the way up to 675 horsepower. Curtis Rotary, and Packard, another familiar name in the auto world in the early days, not so much anymore. And the Liberty inverted engine. As you can see, the crankcase up top, cylinder heads down at the bottom. And along with aviation technology, it also helped spur on the technology in the automotive world. A lot of people don't know that disc brakes were a product of aviation before they were actually used on automotive applications. And it's amazing that in less than 30 years, aircraft technology grew by leaps and bounds. Interwar years technology, the Curtis P-6E Hawk. Name of the game was cylinders. Cylinders, cylinders. The massive V12s. Once again, a very familiar name for us in these times, the Boeing P-12E. And within a matter of a young man's lifetime, less than 30 years, we go from the canvas shelled aircraft to the metal shared aircraft. The Boeing P-26A pea shooter. 230 cal, 150 cal machine gun with capability of a 200-pound bomb. The Pratt & Whitney Wasp radial, 500 horsepower, top speed 234 miles per hour. with the Packard 3A 2500 engine, we're getting closer and closer to the 1,000 horsepower mark. Displacement is the name of this game. And still in the interwar years, we have a manufacturer that is very familiar, the Fairchild PT-19A. Top speed of 124 miles an hour, and we're flying even more higher. And we still have to remember that all of this technology started with a vision and exploded within a matter of less than 30 years. The vision. Now, let's head on over to World War II. Explosion of technology. The one thing that comes out of war is technology. The aircrafts grow in orders of magnitude that the Wright brothers were dreaming of. Technology, bomb technology, cooling, tire technology. Most people don't understand that you can't just have a conventional tire. You can't land on just anything without it exploding. The Douglas B-18A. The cargo capacity grew by high orders of magnitude. We have the North American B-25B Mitchell using the massive Wright R-2600 Cyclone. And we have something that revolutionized engines, a force-fed induction, aka a supercharger. You can create pressures in the cylinder that are above atmospheric. That's what any force-fed induction does. So more air shoved into the combustion chamber means more fuel, means more power. Because we are up into the 1,700 horsepower, crossing the 1,000 horsepower mark. Now here we have the Allison V1710-85. 12-cylinder liquid-cooled V-type that had a prop shaft that went to a differential that allowed the motor to be set farther rear to increase aerodynamics and also to run this 20mm cannon. As you can see, the prop up front and the exhaust further back. Normally that would be up front here. And the front of that aircraft could be smaller, more aerodynamic, is more efficient. And this is the Bell P-39Q. Right here we have one of the heroes of World War II, the consolidated B-24D Liberator. The B is designated bomber, and right there you can see that bomb sight and the bombardier for highly accurate munitions drops. Lucky enough to be here with the Memphis Belle, the American icon. It's a pleasure and a privilege to be able to stand in front of the Boeing B-17 and have a perfect example right here in Dayton, Ohio. And right here we have the classic Boeing B-17. We have 50 cal machine guns up front, the sophisticated bomb sighting device. We have 4 of these Wright R-1820s. And here we can have an example of that sophisticated bombing sight. One of the most famous attributes of this aircraft, the twin 50 cal machine gunner. We have 50 cal on the waist. And without this aircraft, things may have gone a lot different. Imagine the courage it took to sit in between 2 50 cal machine guns protruding from a bottom of a very large aircraft. And in World War II, more B bomber classified aircraft, the Martin B-26G. And here you can get a real good example of that sophisticated bombing sight. Now, I'm not really sure why they have this one tucked over in a dark corner, because this is the Rolls-Royce Merlin, one of the most famous World War II engines. And we can see here the overhead cam. have 2 intake for 1 exhaust. And here we have one of the most famous fighters of World War II, the P-51 Mustang, powered by that Merlin engine over there. Now we've broken far past 1,000 horsepower with that 1,600 horsepower Merlin. We're flying faster and higher. Tail gunner, 250 cals pointed to the rear. And with the progression of everything in technology in World War II, we have the C designation, the Douglas C-47D. C is cargo. We also got our first taste of the turbojet engine. The Messerschmitt ME-262A. And it's amazing how small this is, but how much units of energy it has. This is Little Boy, the atomic bomb, the first one dropped. Then the second one, Fat Man, was dropped just a few days later. Massive amounts of energy in such a small package. It's actually quite large, but for how much energy it has, it's quite small. The Rockstar B-29 definitely changed history right here. And remember, we went from this to this to this with just a vision.